Dolittle. Although released in 2020, this movie was unscathed by the events of that year as it had a January release. And by the time everyone was hiding under their rocks, this was already sent to home media by March. The 3D version was briefly available for a time under the Australian label Random Space, who have long since gone under, but a new 3D edition is being resurrected under the German Turbine label. We can once again enjoy the movie Robert Downey Jr. has called the most important film of his career. Now, he was taking it on the chin, as this one was greatly panned. Indeed, at least two other 3D reviewers completely dismissed this movie, including the gold standard of 3D reviews himself, Tommy Boy. I hate to say it, but I think I found something I'm going to disagree with him on. For all this movie's faults, the 3D wasn't one of them. I found it offered many enjoyable stereo scenes. There were very few vistas, but when they were present, I found they had just a slight touch of hyper stereo, which I enjoyed, and the rooms were so often crowded with junk and animals, and I didn't notice anything get left out of the stereo treatment. Shots like this operation were quite fun to see, if brief. They did marvelous work on this fish tank as well. In fact, I wonder if they were able to get the fish tank on its own, convert it, and then marry it to the background afterwards. I don't know, but it's a flawless conversion moment. And there's some other great underwater shots elsewhere. Notice how they separate the glass from his face here. Tunnels and corridors abound, and they always looked acceptably deep. Elsewhere, we get a classic visit to a dungeon cell where we have bars that are very nicely separated. Jailhouses are always a treat to see in 3D, and not to mention that we have a wonderful grumpy tagger who spends a lot of time on screen. Several snouts are shoved in the camera. Never exactly a poke out, but an entertaining nudge. I suppose there were few, perhaps even several, missed opportunities for some real pop, but nothing too egregious, except perhaps for the opening. In my mind, there was really no excuse to leave that flat, but I digress. From a stereo perspective, it's a bright, colorful, pleasant little 3D ride. Story-wise, again, I'll step a bit further from the other reviewers and say it wasn't that bad of a yarn. It reminded me of a daily serial I watched as a kid one summer, made by the American Public Broadcasting that followed some kids while they manned an old-fashioned schooner and got shipwrecked. Today, I probably wouldn't give the show more than a few nostalgic minutes, but at the time, I found it really gripping. It wasn't so much about following the story, it was about imagining being there. Now, I lived 1,000 miles from any ocean, and a schooner was a very exotic and interesting contraption to me, and watching someone my size get around on it seemed to inform my imagination on how I might fumble around something like that. And this is a movie that allows for that kind of experience. It's a gently paced movie that's more of a gallery of cute moments and silly jokes than an actual story. Drama is largely replaced with hijinks and pratfalls, and it's a brightly lit playground for a young mind and uncomplicated understanding. It's not quite a family movie. It is, in fact, a kid's movie. I can understand why a grown adult might be bored or even put off here. It is dressed up in big boy blockbuster clothes, almost a Phantom Menace scenario, where we are surrounded by fantastic CGI that suggests great sophistication is at play here, but it's put to the service of a kid racing around going, whoopee! Instead of Jar Jar, we get a vegan polar bear. Dolittle himself could be described as having little more than a supporting role in his own movie. He is pretty much one of the animals. The real center of the movie is a wide-eyed boy who accompanies him on his adventure. Though not a bad actor, he is at all times surrounded by something a lot more interesting than he is. So he ends up being a wallflower. But again, that's not important. He's there as a placeholder so kids have an idea of how they'd fit in the world. It was probably a mistake to have the biggest Marvel star at the time in the title role, as again, it implied an adventure that grown-ups could tag along on. As a young kids movie, though, I think Dolittle does just fine.